not even joking when I say this, in my opinion, is the finest 2 hours of Doctor Who in the show's history. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. I think it's actually intriguing and enlightening that the finest 2 hours of Doctor Who take place in a story in which the Doctor is essentially not present, except for the very beginning and the very end. Which, coincidentally, he's also largely not present in the next story, but I'll get to that tomorrow. But although the Time Lord, the Doctor, is not present for the story, the human John Smith is very much there and very much the heart of this story. And David Tennant is spectacular in the role of John Smith, as being separate and distinct from the Doctor. And yet, all of the qualities that make the Doctor such a fine character are also present in John Smith in very different ways. And it's very telling that the crux of the climax of the story turns on John Smith being willing to die in order to save so many other lives. As Joan Redfern points out to the Doctor, John Smith is so much more brave than the Doctor, in that the Doctor only chose to change, whereas John Smith chose to give up not only his current life, but the entire future life he saw for himself, with a happy marriage and children and growing old together and living a long and happy and productive life as just a decent man. And that's something that is forever denied to the Doctor. And the impact of this story across the rest of the series going forward, even up to today, can't be missed. I mean, look at what happens. The Doctor is absolutely taken aback when, at the end of the story, Joan Redfern declines not only to travel with him, but throws back in his face the simple fact that had the Doctor not chosen on a whim to come and hide in that time and that place, that all of those people would not have died. And while certainly the Doctor could correctly argue that people would have died somewhere and the threat of the family of blood was much larger than just a few people, that does not change the fact that people died because of the Doctor. And everywhere the Doctor goes, chaos follows. And that impact on him, you see that going forward throughout the remainder of the David Tennant series. This is really the tipping point where the 10th Doctor turns into the lonely god character. And that death of John Smith hangs with him so much that in the next series finale, the Doctor actually halts a regeneration, or more properly, forces the regeneration back into himself, refusing to die. And then, when he eventually is forced to change, he resists that call. He resists the song of the Ood. He resists going to that ultimate sacrifice, even knowing that it's necessary, and becomes the 11th Doctor, who on the surface is so whimsical, and yet underneath still carries that aging, ageless, lonely god persona, to the point where he spends most of his regeneration on a single planet, fighting off hordes of alien enemies for century upon century upon century, resisting the need to die until he's granted more regenerations. And again, you get to the 12th Doctor, and he goes through his entire life cycle. He spends millions of years inside the confession dial, dying and dying and dying, and when it comes time for his regeneration, he fights it, and he reflects upon the first Doctor fighting it, and ultimately concedes and regenerates, and we get the 13th Doctor. And who knows where that's headed. I suspect we're headed for a regeneration by the end of this year. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I think I'm probably not. And all of that comes from the impact of this story by Paul Cornell. This is such an absolute pivotal moment in the show's history. And I think it's really interesting that we have, for me at least, back to back, the story that is the finest 2 hours of the program in its entire history, but which to fully appreciate, you have to be a long-term fan and understand all of the nuances of the characterizations and the dynamics that are happening beneath the surface to really fully understand and appreciate the story. I mean, it's a good story on its own merits, don't get me wrong. But for it to really hit you the way it hits me, you have to at least have been watching the series for some good length of time to understand what it's all about. And then you pair that with the next story that I'll get to tomorrow, which I would argue is in another way the best single episode of Doctor Who, in terms of if you were going to take someone who has never seen the program before, the next story is the one to give them to watch in 1 hour, and they need to know absolutely nothing, and it's phenomenal. And so it's two sides of the same coin, today's story and tomorrow's story, and I'll have more to say about that tomorrow. But just to say, I have thoroughly enjoyed revisiting this story today, and I love it so much. And I absolutely, if you've never seen this one, it's the one to watch. Anyway, that wraps up for today. Tomorrow, my favorite companion who never was, Sally Sparrow. I'll see you tomorrow.